What's going on, guys? It's Jimmy and Matthew back again for another dank podcast, dude. We're gonna have Chirs Vidal on for episode 15, and super stoked about what he has to say, guys.
Okay, so today, this episode of the Not Network podcast, we have Chirs Vidal. All right. Now, I'm going to be really honest. I did not know this man until probably a couple months ago. I started following him. And what brought me to his attention, what brought my attention to him is that we have a common friend, and that's Mr. Patrick Foley. Woo. Mr. Patrick 4D, a.k.a. my 3D dad. And I saw him post a story, and it said something about this cool, nice, fresh podcast called The Creative Squeeze. And he was in it, and I had to listen to it. Had to know more about my dad. Never met him before. So I listened to The Creative Squeeze, and it got my gears thinking. It just showed me how much it could really take to reach out and ask somebody for a podcast or to be on a podcast and then just talk to them very casually and just kind of, make a bond and make a story and just have fun with it. And it honestly, Chris, you really inspired me to make this podcast. You, Sarah Dici, were the two heavy hitters of just kind of and you can actually look in our Notion. We have in our little board, mood board, we have The Creative Squeeze in it because the design chops in there. I just loved how y'all formatted everything and what y'all did. And as I listened to each and every episode, my knowledge just increased, and I was just getting amped up. You talked to so many people that I cannot name. I sadly can't name, but I remember one of your episodes. You talk about this guy who got into Nike with shoes, right?
Yes.
Right. So Jordan, right. Jordans. So you go above and beyond to put the knowledge out there, and as we were talking earlier, to put these ideas out there. And we're going to get into who you are and what you do, and I don't want to ruin it by just messing up the words with this. So I'm just going to start off with a simple question. Mr. Chris, how are you, King?
I'm great, guys. I'm so excited
Welcome.
to be here. I'm honored that I could come on. I told you guys earlier, I haven't done a podcast in a while. The Creative Squeeze has dried up for the time being, but we'll see if we can bring it back soon. And get those juices flowing again.
Oh my goodness.
Maybe this is the Kickstarter.
I enjoy having these kinds of conversations. And I love just thinking out loud and thinking deeply about things and trying to find the nuance and trying to find inspiration in whatever is around me.
Yes. And I want to start off with can you give people who don't know you, who are you? What have you been doing? You have such an interesting, multifaceted past that really just amplifies your character and who you are today. Can you describe, just go off on the origin story of who Chris is?
Yeah. As a young chap, I grew up in Tampa, Florida, but then moved up to Northern Virginia outside of DC for high school. And in high school, I was just interested in everything. I love to learn. I love, we can get into that, a slight tangent. I hate the fact that universities have basically a monopoly on allowing young people to think freely and learn together.
Ooh.
Yes.
I like where this is going.
But yeah,
I need my notebook.
No worries. Yeah, we can pause.
Okay, you're good. I got my phone.
Cool.
All right. Continue.
But yeah, in high school, I was a soccer player. I did debate, model UN, science club. I was a science geek. I did a genetic engineering club, got to present at MIT in Boston and Boston University. So like the natural step was to go to school for that. And I ended up going to Virginia Tech for a year doing biomedical engineering. I got into my first biochemistry lab and realized, I don't want to do this as a career. So I made the leap and basically put a presentation together, presented it to my parents, showed them how this isn't like a one-off risky move here, and decided to go to film school. And I went to SCAD. And then while at SCAD, I still love film and I love cinematography, and that's what I wanted to do. But unfortunately, the price that I was paying at SCAD for that kind of degree just didn't really make sense financially to me. So I shifted into branding and advertising. And this past November, I graduated with that. So now I'm just kind of grinding away, trying to find work. For the past 3 years, I've been doing freelance on and off in and around Atlanta.
Congratulations.
Yes, big congrats to that. I have a quick question right off the bat. So you said you put together a presentation for your parents on why it wasn't a risky move to go down to Georgia and go for a film degree. Can you explain to me what that presentation was? Because I am interested to hear.
Yeah. So I knew, my parents are so incredible. I'm so grateful that I had them in my life and they instilled a lot of a pretty good name brand school like Virginia Tech, with a biomedical engineering degree, and jumping ship for a very risky business like film, was going to be a lot for them. So I put together a little presentation. I think I had like 3 or 4 schools that I'd chosen, and I showed them the cost, what kind of plan I would have to put forward, what kind of job opportunities could come from those things. And at that point, when you think film, you think New York, LA, and a lot of the school choices I had were in those places. But, again, cost is a factor in everything. And it just didn't make sense to, go to those places. Even if I could get in the schools, even if I could get a scholarship, the living costs are just crazy.
Right. And it's oversaturated.
My parents
there.
aren't gonna. Yeah, exactly. And at this point I'm thinking, I also want to do this while I'm in school. Like, I don't want to just go to school and then have to get out and try and build up a name somehow. So Atlanta, being the movie capital of the South, really. And at that point, just exploding, with all the Marvel films and Netflix shooting stuff here, like Stranger Things, I was like, okay, Atlanta is the next place to go. And not only for film, all the culture and music here. We'll get into it, but like one of my favorite things is concert photography. It's like the most fun I ever have while just being alone.
Wait, would you say?
Because it's so weird. You're alone, but there's millions of people around you.
Yeah.
Oh, concert photography.
Concert photography? Yeah.
Concert photography.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Sorry.
That seems like a lot of fun.
It's all good. Yeah. So there's so many questions about, and running through my mind about your experience and what you said and kind of your foundation. But I think a lot of people think, artists or creatives are kind of like free flowing, and I want to say it's an E word. It's not angelic. Wait, that's an A word. I don't know. Elated, very happy, kind of.
Sure.
Okay, hippie like. Okay, you think of an artist, you think of somebody who goes out in the woods and goes and like paints and stuff like that. But you went through this meticulous presentation to your parents, the people who, authority figures who kind of destined your life for such a long time, and gave them a way to basically explain to them, this is why this route is a good idea. And I want to ask, what was instilled in you to be so kind of strategic in an artistic direction instead of like free flowing, or if that makes sense?
Yeah. I think it's because, the way I see it is there's kind of, it's so hard to explain. Maybe there's 4 sectors in how you can organize your skills. And one of them is being, analytical and business minded. And the other is that free flowing artistic freedom. And then, those kind of are opposing each other, but then you have 2 other ones, top and bottom, that are more like intrapersonal and interpersonal skills, your ability to know yourself to a really great degree and be able to interact with other people. And all 4 of those things kind of affect each other in many different ways. And I think looking at your skill sets like that makes you far more unique than anyone who is really focused on being super freeform and hippie, or super analytical and business driven.
Right.
And that's, there's a great book, The Medici Effect, that goes into this, and how finding intersections, that's where every great idea is an intersection of 2 other great ideas. And that's where you're going to find these new pathways to innovative products or ideas or sectors. And you see that happening at a more and more rapid pace as technology continues to boom. So thinking in that same way, as you would develop a product, you can develop yourself. And that's another great way to think about that. And it seems to provide pretty decent results.
Amazing.
Wow. Well put.
Yeah. The fact that you have so many different sides of thinking and building towards the same goal. I can't help but wonder what or who was an inspiration to that kind of thinking process, or that kind of way of learning, because you said the Medici Effect. Nobody likes to read books these days. Ooh, okay. And I am so stoked that you do, because I also love to read some books, and I'm adding that to my Goodreads. But who was what kind of infusion was made when you were younger that made you kind of think like that? I'm curious.
Yeah. Again, a huge shout out to my parents. I mean, they are someone who, both of them,
Mom and Dad,
even though they're different, both similarly impacted me in always saying, you can learn whatever you want to learn. And with the advent of the internet, as we all grew up, that was more and more relevant. There was a point where it's like, I'd always ask my dad questions like, how does this work? How does that work? And he's always had the answer. But then there became an age, I don't know when it was, maybe 8, 10, where it was like, okay, Dad doesn't really know all the answers. So let me just start using this thing called Google. And I think that's becoming more and more common on our generation as well, is like kids who find this love for learning because of the internet. We grew up with YouTube, and like the fact that you can just amass this insane variety of knowledge within seconds has really done a big number on me, I guess. And then there's a great guy, Naval Ravikant. He's an investor, but also just a general thinker. But he has an incredible thread on Twitter called How to Get Rich. But it's not like cheesy in that sense. It's really just a lot of tried and true, bits of knowledge from his life. He grew up very poor as an immigrant, and now he's so well off. But one thing that really impacted me that he said is like, we're in this era in which technology is flying at us. You're seeing a million tweets, a million posts
Absolutely,
a second.
Yeah.
And why not think about books that same way? You don't need to sit down and read a book from cover to cover. No one, you don't do that with anything else. When I'm watching videos, I'm like, okay, well, that's useful. That's useful. Okay. Now this isn't useful anymore. I'm going to move on. And I guess I can see the downside to that. We have less of attention span and stuff like that. But at any given moment, I have maybe 8 to 10 books that I'm reading, and they're all from different varieties of interests. Some are psychology, business, some are novels. And that's another thing. And the realization that inspiration doesn't come from within your industry. It always comes from without the outside, or at least good inspiration doesn't come from within your own industry. Maybe at the beginning when you're trying to hone your craft and build up an ability, like Patrick, he's a huge inspiration for so many 3D artists now. But what he did was like bring in a thing outside of the industry. You had people making beautiful VFX or 3D abstract art and stuff, but then he brought in like pop culture, which brought in a whole new generation of people. And he was like, okay, why don't I make fucking SpongeBob or Squidward in 3D?
Right.
And finding those intersections again is what leads to good ideas.
That's actually a fascinating train of thought about the books, and like how we kind of need to retrain ourselves of how we can intake them.
Yeah.
Because when I think about it, I'm like, 300 pages, man, I don't know. But then I can sit there on Twitter and scroll through 300 tweets, and it's easy. I don't bat an eye, and I'm done in 30 minutes, Yeah. So like, there's just so much information out there in the world that is just ripe for the taking. And I think it's important to be eager to learn. And like you said, and as a good example to use with Patrick, like, you can't just intake the same things all the time. Like if I want to get into filmmaking, I can't just watch, I don't know, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang every single day and think that I'm going to become a great filmmaker,
Can't.
Wait, what? Because that's what I've been doing, and it's not working. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, like, well, I need to read
there's a good
books
point to say that, learning the fundamentals is key. Learning about the incredible directors before you and the history that filmmaking has, or you can do this in any industry. Understanding the history is just as important as amassing inspiration right now. And that's why I'm a huge history buff. I grew up loving World War II history and read all those books, and all those movies inspired me so much. So history can be just as important, but just understanding that you're going to find inspiration from the most wild things, and you should, because that's what makes you unique. If you're on Pinterest looking at everything that everyone else is, because you're in these little bubbles that the algorithms have, funneled you into, what does that make you? That doesn't make you unique.
Exactly.
Going from the train of thought of being or intaking multiple sources of information, and even when you said, I'm reading like 8 to 10 books, like usually I'm reading like 3 books at a time, and that's a lot for me. When they are contradicting each other, like say for instance, I just got done reading with Body Keeps a Score, which I think is mainly a mental health book. And I was also reading at the same time a Steve Jobs autobiography. And when you look at those two books, Steve Jobs was a man of, I wouldn't say the best mental health, but he got it done. He got things done, and he made things happen. And on the opposite side of mental health, like that's about being introspective, looking at your past, and trying to figure things out. Where do you see the kind of, I guess, what kind of subjects or main values do you take away from when you have two opposing views?
Well, I think that what that just proves is that it's not necessarily about finding the habits that are going to make you the perfect person, because no one is a perfect person. And then beyond that, I think what's more important is asking the questions, not getting the answers, and I think that's why I really admire Ayn Rand, and a lot of people don't really like objectivism, but I think she really does have all the questions, maybe not all the answers. And I definitely disagree with her on some things as far as a philosophical arena, but with mental health, and maybe specifically to your example, when you have people who are like, yeah, that's a good idea to, have good mental health. But then you see people like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk who are working, 60 to 100 hours a week, in blatant disrespect of what the mental health people are saying is, there's a balance to everything, and asking the questions and thinking deeply about things is way more important than ever getting to an answer about something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the whole point of philosophy. Like when I took a philosophy course in college, what we both did, that's actually where we met. Aw.
Oh, there you go.
But, lost my train of thought. Oh yeah. So yeah, like there's no really right answer in there. And it's very, I think that's a really important class to take when you're in school. And I wish that we were forced to take it in high school, because there's always a correct answer in every other subject, in math and in science. But then in philosophy, it's like the questions were about like who said it. It's important to know who's asking the question, and more importantly, why they're asking the question, because it's always something backing it up that is a truth of the world. So it's important to ask those types of questions. And you seem like a pretty philosophical guy, and definitely a big thinker. So I'm interested to know how you went from, what were you in? Biochemical engineering. What was it?
Biomedical engineering.
Biomedical engineering. You went from there to filmmaking to now in art directing and advertising. So how did that kind of go?
Yeah, so I grew up loving film and photography. I had an uncle who's a camera operator in LA, has a small production company. And I grew up with him around me a lot. He went to NYU for film. Wow. So I always really admired him. He's the closest uncle to me in age, which that probably plays a big role in it as well. And so like being artistic, although I'm a horrible drawer or fine arts, digital arts is definitely where I find myself, excelling. Sure. But
nice.
I think that had a huge impact on me. And school, I excelled in science because I enjoyed learning. And I think out of all the subjects in school, science was the one that you could dive deepest into. There was never a limit to how far you could go with science. Whereas maybe especially in the public school system, there is kind of a bit of a surface level knowledge with a lot of the other subjects, and a very small input from the arts. So I think that definitely had a huge role on me. Cause I had actually been thinking about this before I went to Virginia Tech. I was like, I love film and I'm obsessed with it, but it's going to be far easier for me to transfer from a science school to an art school than it is from an art school to a science school. If I went to an art school first and decided, okay, this isn't for me, I want to go to a science school. There's my dogs.
Hi, dogs.
So that was really more of a logistics decision. And then beyond that, it became a financial decision when I got to SCAD and realized, having a film degree wasn't going to be really worth the amount of money I was paying. If I could do it all over again, I probably would have gone to like portfolio school or, kind of a basics. What do they call them? like a trade school for film. That would have been a shorter program and would have been enabled me to just get into the industry, because that's what you have to do for film. Like, you just need to get in, start making connections, and build your way up. And at this point, I was too far in the hole as far as student loans that I was like, if I'm going to graduate with this amount of debt, a guarantee towards an income.
Sure. Yeah. Well, okay. So you said, you mentioned a film trade school. I'm surprised that I've never heard of this. Do you know any of like the top of your head?
I know for a fact that in Georgia there is, I don't know the one that, I think it's called the Georgia Institute of Film or something like that, but they have like an 18-month program where they're just going to give you all the basic skills you need to get in on a film set. And that might not necessarily mean you're going to be above the line or even close to any kind of management level. But I think it's very cheap. For anyone who's interested in that, I would assume that would probably be a bit more financially successful. And don't get me wrong, there are people in the film program from SCAD who are going to be successful and who are successful. But when you're thinking about it long-term wise, money wise, I guess, those things come into play a lot more the older you get.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Right when you were making these jumps from film school then to brand strategy and content, what was the importance? Could you kind of describe how valuable it was to get your feet wet in experiencing, what Virginia Tech had to offer?
Yeah, so Virginia Tech,
and what made you like not want to?
So Virginia Tech really doesn't have a film school, unfortunately. They have a communications school, but that's not really what I was looking for at that point in my life. But for the second half of that year that I went to Virginia Tech, I actually joined the theater school.
Oh, okay.
That they have, and that's the things. But that really did itch the wanting I had, I guess. And I worked in the props department for about 6 months, building sets for shows and set dressing, and really getting a behind the scenes look at, what it takes to bring, in a matter of maybe 6 weeks, a show from an idea to a full-fledged concept, I guess. And it was so gratifying opening night to go and watch a show and be able to finally have that be a reality. Go.
Oh no, just like that's like the amazing part about being a part of some type of production like that, and films especially as well, because there's so much work that goes into the preparation. And then oftentimes, especially with like a theater production, maybe you'll have just one night where you do the big performance and then that's it. After like 6 months of rehearsals and dress rehearsals and building the sets and everything, and then it's just like boom, your big kabam, and then it's over. But it's so gratifying to, like you said, for that to happen. But you also have to love doing it in the first place. It can't always just be about that end goal. So is that kind of where you discovered, like, you enjoyed the actual process of like building the sets and just being a part of the actual production part of it rather than just appreciating the end product?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's where so I guess two things. One, you want to find a career, whatever you're going to do, find a career where you fall in love with the process, not the product. But also, that's also where I kind of found a real interest in strategy. And I think that's what comes to fruition later on when I decide to leave the film school and go into advertising and branding, because advertising branding kind of affords me both of those worlds where I get to have a hand in the production, and we get to create things and still create a product that we're going to put out and let everyone see and interact with. But there's a keen sense of strategy behind everything. You know, we need to think really deeply about what we're doing and how we're going to execute it. And then we go do it.
Mm-hmm.
So like being a part of the ad experience and creating those, are they being like art pieces made for advertisements? Are they a lot different than what you would consider like a regular art piece? Or is there a similar process that goes into it?
There's probably a similar technical process behind them. But I think their inception is far different. You know, a regular fine arts piece that you'd go to a gallery to see is usually an expression of what the artist is trying to say to the world. Whereas a piece of advertising is usually an expression of what a brand thinks people want. And I think there is a growing number of people in the ad world that understand that, you know, you can now take a more personal approach to this, and you can have a company who stands for something. And you see that with advocacy marketing now, where you have brands like Patagonia who are like, we are going to be the renewable brand. We're going to be the ones who take the charge forward for this cause, or even if it's not a cause, like a social justice cause or anything like that, just having a brand. And that's where I think I bring in a lot of the teachings I got from SCAD, from the fine arts background, because you're taking all these fundamentals at SCAD about color theory, fine arts, drawing,
composition.
You have to go, and not only that, you have to go do like a little bit awkward, but like nude portraiture. You know, you just log this certain amount of hours. I think it was like 20 something hours a semester for your life drawing classes and stuff like that.
Wow.
So I think that's where I bring that into advertising as well, is like people want to join a brand that has a community of like-minded people behind it. And that's what Nike spends millions of dollars a year trying to create, a brand that completely encircles a certain set of values. And that's what I personally am trying to do within my interest space, I guess. I don't know the wording behind that, but I want to be in the video game and technology market. And I think what inherently benefits video games and technology is that they create a community of people around them without any advertising or marketing. Like I said, Nike, they produce a shoe. Millions of people can buy a shoe. There's not really any value or anything that you need to have in common with other people who buy shoes. You know, you could have a hedge fund manager buying a Nike pair of shoes and an athlete. Very different people. Nike has decided to go after a certain kind of market, and they've done a great job of that. But they're spending millions of dollars, especially the advent of multiplayer video games. They're already creating community there for people. And I think that's what's going to be a next big thing in that world, is agencies specialized in community creation. We were talking earlier about how there's some weird wordplay going on with networking, and how like, well, I mean, it's kind of weird that we do this and we know that we aren't actually friends. We're just trying to get something from each other. And then in the same way, I think when you look at video game companies or publishing companies or social media companies, there's community management positions. You shouldn't be managing your community. That doesn't make any sense. Why would you ever want someone to manage a community? You want someone who's going to empower a community, someone who's going to cultivate a community. So that's something that I'm personally trying to do with that field. And I'm at the infancy of that, so we'll see where that goes. But that's what I'm trying to do on a personal level. And I guess that kind of brings us full circle to where I am now and what I'm trying to do moving forward.
Yeah. Okay, so you just said something that is very powerful to me and probably to us, because we're trying to like foster a community within what we're trying to do. So we work primarily and talk to a lot of like 3D artists and stuff, and we're very involved in that space and crypto art and things like that. But you're saying like you don't want someone to like try to create a community. I feel like a community is something that is there and it like festers and builds within itself, and it has to be kind of like a free flowing thing, and it can't be managed, or it shouldn't be managed. But I just think it's interesting what you said about how a community shouldn't be managed or it can't be managed. What do you think's a better alternative? Like, how can you foster a community rather than try to manage it?
Yeah. So this is kind of the idea of behind what I want to do with the space is community cultivation. And maybe that's just a buzzword. Maybe we are still creating a community, but really what I want to do is, and you can do this outside of the video gaming space, but understanding that, so that at the advent of social media, and it's still prevalent a little bit today, companies realized, oh, you have influencers. So people who can command a certain segment of the market and push them towards products. And there was this big race to find influencers and pay them tons of money to get them to promote their product. And I think where that kind of fell apart was the idea that these people are following this person for those kinds of references. If you're following a celebrity, I don't really care what product they use. And I'm sure there is a segment of people who do, but the next big jump was when there were community influencers. So like people who started creating communities around themselves and like, hey, this is what I stand for. This is what I want to do. So like Patrick, he creates a community around himself, and then he can market products like his HDRI packs that are perfectly targeted at his own community.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think that's another important part of community creation is letting it foster itself and grow, but also giving it a little bit of a boost by, picking out people in your community who have something to say. And this is really more pertaining to brands, larger brands. So in the video gaming space, you can pick a couple of streamers that are really high profile who are playing your game a lot. And then we use marketing through those streamers to target our own audience a little bit with a little bit more of a personal touch than we would otherwise. And then we're kind of creating this revolving door of community growth where we're targeting or figuring out influencers, giving them an ability to join the community and be part of the leadership of the community in a natural sense. We didn't choose them from the beginning to be the leaders. They grew by themselves to become leaders in the community. So why don't we just attach ourselves to that as the brand who the product all revolves around, and then use them to create funnels for us to understand our audience even better and help them understand their audience. And then through that, also adding more and more people to this revolving door of community.
That's a great way to put it. Far better. I could not have said those words better myself. And that brings me to think about the end of kind of the influencing cycle. Chris, I don't know if you've heard of Jonathan Morrison or Morris, but he's a tech YouTuber.
Yes.
And
I know.
He goes over, So he goes over a bunch of like cameras and lenses and like, I guess what to wear to school. Last time I watched him, it was like 2016 or something. It was ages ago, but he was kind of like this fun, fresh guy. And he quit YouTube to work for like an actual company and an actual brand. So what do you think about brands cultivating, I guess, the influencers from within? Like Moment, I know is doing that sort of thing. You know, Moment has these pocket lenses and these products that they give to the influencers. Influencers rep them, and then people buy them. But now what they're doing is that they're having their own content being created for them, and it takes away kind of the influencer part. Do you think that could be like sustainable?
Oh, as of right now, yes. I mean, things can always change, but content is always going to be king. And we talked about it later. Starting a podcast, solidifies you as a thought leader. And you can try and use influencer marketing, and it does work to a great extent. But if you start producing content, and you see this with the Future, FUTUR.
Yeah. Chris Do,
exactly. He could have probably put those ideas out into the world through other people, but he created an entire community around the content they created. And then also a revenue stream as well. I mean, not only from the ads, but he sells packages, he sells seminars.
He's making fat stacks. That's what he's doing.
Yes. On top of the incredible Emmy-winning agency that he founded.
Yes. In LA. Yeah. He's doing very well off.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's so smart for any brand to be creating their own content, and being aware of trends, but also trying to find their own voice as well.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you this, Chris. This is kind of like, it's in the same area, but it's kind of like oddball. It's just what I thought of. All right. So I started thinking about social media, right? And then thinking about like Wendy's Twitter account and how they're always like shitting on random like companies, and they like reply to people and roast people. How do you, what happened? Sorry. Okay. Yeah. So the computer screen just went totally white, and it freaked me out.
Very good.
Like what is that? Is there a reason for that? Is there like a psychological thing to that? Or did they just let some kid run their account and then it got like 1 million likes and they were just cool with it?
Yeah. I think there is immense risk, but immense upside in joining a culture war. The culture wars at large or within any kind of niche community. I guess I'm trying to think through this, but I think one powerful thing that Wendy's highlights is originality, and probably to an extent a little bit of our clapback culture where chaos sells, and you see this with the news a lot too.
Oh yeah,
the Joker.
The Joker,
yes,
baby.
The Joker, exactly. No one would make money if every day you turn on the news and it was like, everything's fine, everything's good, all right, have a good day.
Like, okay, I could turn that off now.
Yeah.
That's true.
So to that same extent, I think Wendy's capitalized on that culture, but in a lighthearted way. I don't think they go too far ever. And if they did, I don't really think anyone would care. I think you'd have a certain sect of people who would try and blow it up out of proportion, and you'd have a news media that would try and say that it's not politically correct or whatever you want to say.
They try to cancel them. They try to cancel Wendy's.
I don't think it would really hurt their brand because they already know their audience.
Sure. At the end of the day, they sell burgers.
Yeah.
But that's the weird thing. So it's like a fine line. It's like, okay, you can, like you said, there's a great reward, but also, I mean, kind of a great risk in a culture war type of aspect, but not really in the actual, like their Twitter account. Like it can only really be good for them, because at the end of the day, people, even if everyone off of Twitter stopped going to Wendy's, there's still an entire generation or two that will still go to Wendy's because they've never seen the tweet before. You know what I mean? So like at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. But it gets us talking about Wendy's just randomly. And like, that was the first Twitter account that I thought of that does that. But at the same time, it kind of has to be organic. It can't be like a forced type of thing. Because if you see other companies try to get in on the action, you're like, oh, that's fake, and like kind of cringe. And you don't, there's like a negative thing with that if they're trying to
an extremely
artificially
fine
bring
line,
this about. Yes.
Between inauthenticity and authenticity. And that's all something I'm exploring too. And I don't think anyone truly knows yet how to truly come off as authentic. I think it has a lot to do with just speaking your mind.
A little confidence helps too.
And
especially if you're like
understanding
that. Go ahead.
Oh, and just understanding that you're never going to make everyone happy.
That's true. Oh, that makes me think of I used to watch a lot of Gary Vaynerchuk, and he's one of the main reasons why I stopped saying stopped saying network, was because it just some things he said. But he said that, when you're going to put yourself out there, when you're going to put out the content, and like you said, content is king. And if you are going to put an amass amount of content, let's take, for instance, Beeple Crap, Mike Winkleman. Let's take him, for example. So he puts out, an absurd amount of content, and you're going to have two reactions. You can have both, or you can just be one or the other. But you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. And that's the thing, is that you're not going to please everybody. And it's not your job to please everybody. And especially with art, your job with art is to do it.
Yeah, your job's to get a reaction.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well,
one way or the other.
Yeah, if that's from yourself, if that's from your family, because, some people look at it and be like, Beeple has done a tremendous job of, like, completely sailing through that phase, and people will, he will get a reaction out of anything. Totally. Which is phenomenal. Have you seen Beeple recently, Chris?
Yes, I love Beeple. There is a great Corridor Digital video with him where they do like a 24-hour challenge, or like I don't know how long it is, 4-hour challenge.
Daily, yeah. Because
it's every single day, for like I think 9+ years or something like that.
13, right?
5,000 days.
Something longer than that, yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's that saying, it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. So it pays off, if you focus yourself on one thing and do everything in your power to move towards that goal, it'll eventually come. But you have to be willing to give up other things, and one of those is pleasing everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Quentin Tarantino once said something along the lines of like, I don't want somebody to walk out of the theater and me ask them what they thought about the movie and them just say, it was fine. Like, just kind of like minimal to no reaction. He would rather them say that they absolutely hated it, they hate him, they hate all the actors in it because it was the worst movie that they've ever seen, than have them say, I don't know, I just don't have too much to say about it. Because that means that he did something that was different and unique, and something that most likely someone else is going to call a masterpiece. And that is almost exclusively how people view his movies anyway, especially this last one. I don't know if you're a big fan of his movies, or if you saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, like, it had crazy critical success, really, really low audience scores. And they're very, everyone you ask, like you said, either hates it or they loved it. And it's just...
it's because they mess with Bruce Lee. That's the sole reason. You don't mess with Bruce Lee.
That's what it is.
That's all I'm saying.
I
get fired up about that.
I think it might stem from our culture's inability to value pain as much as we value happiness.
Ooh.
Because I think that is what art is, to get some kind of a reaction. It doesn't mean it has to be good or bad. Whatever it is, it's a reaction. Whatever it is an emotional stirring that it causes inside of you. And I think it does. Maybe it is a downside of the mental health skyrocket,
People.
I guess. Yeah, like where it's like, hey, we need to always be moving in a direction towards making you happy or finding happiness or finding peace or tranquility or enlightenment. It really completely ignores the immense value in pain, in suffering, in sadness, because like you aren't the wave, you're the surfer. So, you're always going to be going up and down, and you have no control at the end of the day of what really happens to you.
Yeah.
Only about how you react to it,
Yeah. And this is, we're talking about like very, very little bumps in the road, not like severe trauma happening,
Sure.
If you have like trauma, then you probably, talking to somebody.
Yeah, deal with that.
Yeah.
Deal with that.
Exactly.
Yes, yeah.
But, and I think, Chris, which you said kind of falls in lines with, the belief of, the Stoics and Stoicism.
Yeah. So
Of that. And actually you put on the gram a really interesting quote that I kind of want to read. It says, if a writer knows enough about what he is writing about, he may omit things that he knows. The dignity of movement of an iceberg is due to only 1/9 of it being above water, by Ernest Hemingway.
yeah.
Wow.
I would love. Hemingway's on my books to read. That and Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Yes.
Have you read that one?
It's on my list. I have not read it yet, but it's on my list.
Yeah. I just wanted to know, like, what are your thoughts on kind of Stoicism, that quote, Ernest Hemingway, and the juxtaposition of kind of between, I wouldn't even say mental health, but promoting mental well-being and then promoting the value in suffering.
Yeah, well, I think
that was a lot.
Another thing that a really foundational part of Stoicism is understanding that suffering is inevitable. There is no escaping suffering. There's only dealing with it and learning to deal with it and learning to move forward with it is essential. And I think, you look at Stoics like Marcus Aurelius and his diaries, we only read those now because someone else, got them. He wrote all of that, never thinking that anyone would ever read it. So it really is an elemental truth of his being, and probably why it affects so many people, because he was writing without any anticipation for it to become public. He was writing basically just to himself. And then to that quote, I mean, maybe this can be applied to like understanding other people too. Understanding that whatever is going on with your interaction with another person is never the full story. And being able to understand that you see the world from the tiny pocket of your own eyes. You don't actually understand it in any grand sense. You can attempt to, but you never will. Which is why you have to be able to value other people's ideas and thoughts, even if they make no sense to you in any way.
Yeah, I think. Do you have a tendency to going off of that, what you said? Do you have a tendency to kind of, if there is something that you disagree with heavily, or that it might seem strange, maybe I guess for an example, you're working with a brand, and I guess there's one of your coworkers, say his name is Jimmy, okay, and he says something just completely absurd, stupid, okay. In the process of creativity and getting the best idea and executing it, how do you deal with just kind of the outlandish and the absurd? What do you do with it?
Yeah. I mean, this is something I'm still working on a personal level, but always remembering that the most famous thinkers, inventors, business people that we know today were once thought of as crazy. And we brought up Steve Jobs earlier. He was ridiculed for decades. And everyone thought he was a kook and that he was a failure. I mean, he got kicked out of his own company and he had to go start next. And understanding that there is no success without risk. And most of the time people are going to fall flat on their face. So when people throw out a weird idea or just flat out stupid, I try and remember not to blame them for the idea and try and remember that they're risking their own validation and sanity, I guess, by putting ideas out in the world. And that's something that is far more valuable than ever finding the correct idea or a successful one. And you definitely want to support that in people. And there's ways to do that while also teaching them that there are stupid ideas.
Definitely.
But yeah, trying to keep that in mind, which is obviously something that everyone has to work on all the time, because there are still days where I'll skip a beat and catch myself somewhat talking down to someone or ridiculing someone or giving someone a tone for something that's not really affecting me in any serious sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's just so that can be applied to literally every single facet of everyone's life. And it really should be, in my opinion. And something that I talked to my girlfriend about a couple of days ago, it was something along the lines of like about the political divide and how oftentimes we mistake passion for, we mistake stubbornness for passion. So when someone is like very set in their ways and we're like, oh man, yeah, they're just passionate about something. But I think it's a lot more important to be receptive. And that's how you begin to like become a free thinker, which is very important in a society. I mean, without getting too deep into it though, like it's just it's exactly what you're saying. Just being receptive and telling someone like, hey, you're not an idiot, but I mean, at some point you got to have, you got to think for yourself at some point.
Yeah. And you don't even have to be that like direct with it either. You can, because what I really like to do is I like to entertain ideas. And that's because when I was a kid, like I'd say the stupidest shit. Oh my goodness, dude. Dude, I had this one idea.
No way.
Dude, I know, right? Dude, I had this one idea, okay? Is think of an apple, a coreless apple. Dude, how cool would that be?
Like a donut? Like a donut apple?
Like an apple, but like an apple from a tree, but coreless. So you could eat the whole thing. It's efficiency to the max, okay? All right? Listen. Just, it's crazy shit. But people did not entertain that idea and made me feel like shit.
Yeah.
So turning it into a positive direction, now when somebody comes at me with something stupid, I try my best to entertain it. Maybe I'll learn something, Maybe I'll learn what they were trying to actually say instead of, what I was perceiving. Yeah.
So Chris, what do you think about this notion that like kids are absolutely creative and basically become less and less creative because of how society treats them? And so by the time that they're adults, being creative and using your imagination and doing silly things, quote unquote, silly things is basically like completely frowned upon. What do you think of the notion that that's like what our society does? And do you think that should actually be changed?
Yeah. So I think with anything, there's a balance between nature and nurture. I think I don't want to quote anything or sound like I'm an expert in this field at all, but like I have read a couple things that there are some signals to predisposition towards creativity. So in some way, there is a bit of a nature role into how creative someone is. But in that same way, I think, yes, our society does kind of push people towards picking a box or picking a lane. And I don't know if there's anything necessarily bad with that. In a perfect world, we would try and have a majority of people partaking in creative endeavors, because that's what really separates us as humans from any other animal, is our ability to creatively think. But it's a gray area that maybe I haven't given it enough thought, but I think there is, because I can see both sides of it. There's the one side that's like, hey, we should just let people, we need to like pull off the shackles and let people just creatively do whatever they want. But then you have other side of people who have a very valid argument in saying, no, we need to figure out who's the best at these kinds of things and allocate them efficiently, and allocate our resources efficiently, allocate our human capital efficiently, and try and select those people at a young age and push them through a pipeline that puts them in a field that they are best suited for, and they can produce the most value for the rest of everyone else. So it's like a pendulum. I think there's a little bit of both. I think we probably could find a better balance, especially with the advent of the internet. I don't think I think our generation thinks about this, but older people don't realize the almost infinite power that the internet could have in creating jobs and new career paths. 10, 20 years ago, you could never have said that you're a YouTuber. That's my career. I post YouTube videos, or I'm an Instagram influencer and I make $50K a year just posting Instagram posts.
Crazy.
So I think the internet will bring about an incredible change in how our society is structured, and in many ways reverse what the Industrial Revolution did. The Industrial Revolution caused us all to specialize, whereas the internet, the information revolution, which is the internet, I think will bring us back to a state of decentralized thought, creativity, and generalization.
That's so wild you say that, because as like throughout like this past year, I've been listening to the School of Motion podcast, and it's this guy from Joey Corman, and he goes and talks to a bunch of different creatives, and he was saying throughout, and he was talking to people, and it seems like that's even like I guess leaders in the industry, and this goes out through not just the creative, but kind of a little bit of everything, is that nobody's really looking for, or maybe it is specifically to the creative, but nobody's really looking for kind of a specialist unless they have like a very big team. We're all looking for these generalists, somebody who can do just kind of like a little bit of everything. And that's so important that we live in an age of, the information age, where we can get all that information. We don't really have to retain all of it either. We can keep it at the surface level and have like, our main hard drive be the internet, and our like, I guess brain is our RAM. I'm talking really nerd here, but that's how I think, dude. That's just
definitely.
Super cool to say.
That's one thing that the internet enables us to do, is kind of outsource a certain amount of thinking because it's so easily accessible, and then focus on creating foundational structures and habits in our own minds that help facilitate our use of that information.
Right. So speaking of foundation, I have to bring up this Instagram post that you said. You were taking photos daily for quite some time. or not taking photos, but posting them daily. So I would say that there was a little bit of time spent on editing them, finding a good eye, and fine tuning kind of your taste and closing the gap, as Iris Glass says. But in one of these photos, I think it was a black and white, or this is probably when you started doing more black and white photography. But you said the past couple of days have been pretty rough. Losing all my equipment set me back a couple of months of work and crushed my spirit. But last night changed everything. My first concert with the press pass, and it was so incredible. Ash music and Love songs. Is that right?
Yeah,
Love songs.
Yeah.
Love songs were so amazing, and I finally lived my dream of shooting a concert. Without a doubt, I can say I'm hooked. The next couple months are going to be tough, replacing all my stuff, but at least nights like these will make everything better. And just as you said before, your dream was concert photography, and I guess this was the night after, kind of setting your foot into that. What happened? And I can't help but think that this story was pinnacle, or this event, this day, this past 48 hours was incredible for you.
Yeah. So this was 2018. I had been in Atlanta for maybe, let's say 6-ish months. And unfortunately, I take part of the blame on myself for just not being conscious enough. But I left my camera bag somewhere I shouldn't have, and it got stolen. And there's probably like over $5,000 worth of equipment in it. Everything I had before coming to SCAD, the summer before coming to SCAD in the fall of 2017, I worked for almost 2.5-3 months straight, 40 hours a week at Home Depot to save up enough money to buy a camera, buy equipment, so I could come to Atlanta and be like, okay, I'm ready. Let's go. And so that was a massive heartbreak for me. I remember that was probably the first time since I was a child that I called my mom, and like as soon as she picked up the phone, I just started bawling. Like, and it wasn't even like I was like I wanted to cry or something, but it was just like my body, the emotions that I had pent up in my head, and I didn't want to break down in front of other people, like my friends and my roommates or anything. And it just all came out. But it was a very humbling moment. I can say that I look back at it now and it is probably for the best. It taught me a lot, and taught me, that no matter what you do, it's curveballs like that are going to get thrown at you, and you just have to learn how to deal with them. And make a second, and I'll admit it, cry out or whatever you need to do. But then get back to the grind and start rebuilding. And basically with every fall, there's so much more progress after that. And after that, it was probably one of the craziest rides ever. I did that concert. I borrowed a friend's camera for that concert, and then
shout out to friends,
right? Yes. Shout out to Barbara Rigo, and we can definitely talk about her. Barbara. She lent me her camera, and I got to shoot that concert. Incredible. And because of that, I was able to, start shooting more and more concerts. I ended up reconnecting with that guy, Love. And I went with Barbara to Alabama to shoot one of his concerts at this like small festival in Birmingham. And we ended up meeting Max, the artist. He has that song like Lights Down Low. He just released an album, but we were on our way to that concert. It's like a 2-hour drive. We were with, it was me, Barbara, and my friend Chris. And on our way there, Barbara is a collage artist. So definitely everyone go check her out. I think her Instagram's like Mind of Barbara.
It'll be in the show notes. Big shout out.
Definitely. On our way there, she posted a collage of Max. And this was another huge point of concept photography in that kind of area and learning how to be a freelancer. Cause I think everyone who's a freelancer kind of has to go through this stage where it's like, you realize that it's hundreds of cold calls, hundreds of cold emails, and maybe 20% of them get back to you. And then of that 20%, maybe 2% actually come to fruition and become a job or anything like that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we always, whenever I went to a concert or try to go to a concert, it's just cold emailing the manager or whatever. And we Instagram DM this guy, Max, and 15 minutes from the venue, he's like, oh my God, I love the collage. Meet me out back. And we go to the back, like the service entrance, and he's there waiting, and he brings us backstage, and we just hang out with him for the rest of the night. We get to shoot the show. They talk. Barbara ends up doing a couple of album covers for him. And that also started Barbara's crazy career. Now she's, she just moved back to Atlanta, but she moved to LA for a bit before COVID, and was doing collages for like Puma and Red Bull and Sprite. She had a billboard in Times Square. So insane.
Nice.
Crazy rocket movement for her. But yeah, I mean, that all spawned from me having one of the worst days of my life and losing all of my equipment that I worked months for.
I love it how you're just talking about her, and then you're talking about this terrible experience, and then you're just gassing up, one of your friends. Like, I love that. I love that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, it sounds like someone or something really tried to stop you from what you feel like you want to do. And unfortunately for a lot of people, those types of things work where like, it's just that one thing. And they're like, okay, maybe I shouldn't do this thing that I'm taking a risk on. It's too risky. I just got all my shit stolen. I don't have anything, and I'm just going to stop. Like, I'm just going to go back to Home Depot or whatever the fuck. But you didn't let it stop you. And, I very much respect that. And, that grind is definitely going to make someone like you very successful. So I hope to see, that carry through.
Yeah, definitely. No, it was a very pivotal moment.
We have this segment on the Not Network podcast about it's called Explain the Tweet. However, your Twitter is a private account, and we can't get in. So sad. It's a sad day for the Not Network, but we got a quote. We got a quote that just hit me, and it kind of goes with the resilience, the calloused skin, the calloused mind that you have to go through this thing called life. And it's from probably one of my top 10 favorite movies, Batman Begins. And it's the scene where Bruce is a little boy, and I'm forgetting it as I speak now. Oh no, this is terrible. Wait. Oh, no. It's Bruce's dad. It's Alfred. It's Alfred. He says, it's Bruce Wayne's authority figure, and Bruce falls down, and he says to Bruce, do you know
have to do the accent. Hold on, stop, restart.
The accent?
Yeah, if it's Alfred, you have to do the accent.
It's not Alfred then. It's his dad. All right, Bruce. Bruce.
There you go.
Do you know what happens when we fall? We get back up. And then that's it.
Wow.
I think I butchered that quote.
No worries.
But it hit me so hard in my mind. And when you said that, it hit me so hard. And I had to say
Mad props. Mad props to you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'll let you guys into my Twitter after this. Definitely.
Yes.
The only reason it's private is because I'm not on there as much anymore, but I used to get pretty political, and I was like starting to search for jobs, and I'm like, okay, let me put this on private.
Dude, that's smart. Good thinking.
No recruiter comes in here and is like, what the fuck?
Nice.
Yeah, that was basically the whole objective of this episode, is that we could get into your private Twitter.
Twitter.
So no, I'm just joking.
And now we're in.
Yeah, now we're in. So bye, idiot. No, dude, thank you so much for letting us in a little bit and giving us like 15 philosophical quotes. We really appreciate that. You're like a
straight up
for real,
wisdom.
like, yeah, I mean, you seem like a very wise guy, but not in a
Wise
bad
man.
kind of way.
Wise man.
Yeah, a wise guy is bad, but you're a wise man.
And to that note, I just like to say, I like to give a shout out to that good old thinking of stoicism, because even though it's kind of hated upon and everybody hates it, like even if you're a stoic, like you hate
yourself,
it.
yeah.
Like you kind of hate it sometimes, but it always comes right back at you in the long run. So, yeah, Chris, I'm so glad that you asked Patrick to be on your show so I could find out about you
It's the
and talk
butterfly
to you.
effect.
Yes,
Yeah,
it
definitely.
honestly is. Appreciate you, Chris. Thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you
and
so
remember-
much. It's so fun.
We're not networking. We're making friends.
We're making
Thank
friends.
you, Chris.
I just want to thank Chris for coming on the podcast. I know me and Matthew learned a lot, and we had a blast talking to him, and I hope the listeners did too. Pretty sure they did. If you missed where to find him, check the show notes, linked in the podcast. Thanks, guys, for listening, and have a good one.